After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
Hey folks, it's been a minute since our last episode. Got me and Josh here for a bit of a current affairs recap, and we're gonna talk about the midterms. How you been, Josh?
I've been pretty good. I've been a hot commodity when it comes to these midterms. I actually had an interview with a Georgetown graduate student in journalism about the Michigan gubernatorial race. So I've been more attached to these midterm elections than maybe I would like to be at times.
I gotta get you on the staff payroll. God. That's good. Yeah, I don't know. The thing about all these episodes we've done on like election coverage or just new stuff is just how little I actually seem to know until I read the article live on air. And I'm wondering if that's just endemic to me or if that's everyone listening too.
I mean, there's always like you can't know everything, and there's always like these hidden little like secrets for every story.
Oh yeah, and what's gotten me too is like with just the nature of like who does midterm coverage and like what gets focused on. You know, you've always got your classics. You've got Pennsylvania. It was Virginia was the big one last year. Florida is going to be a funny one we're going to talk about today.
Oh God, yeah.
Bunch of crazy stuff here in Michigan too. We'll definitely get into some of that. Before we do though, while we were off air, holy shit, did I miss this stuff going on across the pond?
Yeah,
They've gone through how many prime ministers now? 2?
Yeah, I mean, so like was that our? I don't think it was our last current events episode, but it might have been. I think it was the one before that, with Boris Johnson.
Yeah,
Stepping down. We talked about kind of the hilarity of his scandals. His successor, Liz Truss, lasted a grand total of 6 weeks.
just enough to collect retirement money. So good on her.
Yeah, I guess. And I thought it was interesting. Like I was seeing like some of her polling, and like she had like a 9% approval rating among conservatives. It's like, damn, like I think Biden's got a better approval rating among conservatives than that.
Right, and I don't know if it's like because I'm not well read on this, or if it's like some of this internal party stuff in a parliamentary system is like off limits to the public, right? What exactly got her the job? You know, because I know it's like party leadership selects, but like,
Yeah,
how do you end up selecting someone no one likes? How does that come around?
I mean, it's like it's sort of like a vote within the party, but like it's such a small portion of it. So like that it's a weird system. I don't know the ins and outs of it myself. But yeah, I mean it's just wild that like it's like during her prime ministry. I mean, like sure, like I'm not gonna say like that was a banger in 6 weeks, right? The Queen dies, the pound crashes more, and their party is just in shambles. So like as I've seen a lot of people joke about, a lot of would-be revolutionaries dream of accomplishing that. She accomplished it in 6 weeks. But it's like on like some level, it's like, I mean, can you really blame her for any of that? Like,
well, and part of me is like, this is me being a classic disrespectful American to hallowed British royal institutions. Exactly how much of this can also just be attributed to like queen death derangement syndrome,
Sure, yeah.
Because like I know, like I was talking about this with my partner a while back, and I think she read an article, I forget where, but it was like everyone's bracing for the recession that happens when Queen Elizabeth dies.
Oh my God.
So at some level, like people knew this was gonna happen, but I mean, I don't know to what end as well, because just with like how much of like business reporting is just investors freaking out. What would prompt an investor to freak out about the Queen's death other than pure sentimentality?
And it's weird too, because you'd think like there'd be like, I don't know, like if they're grieving, like, maybe that is a good time to invest in alcohol or something. You know what I mean? Like
Something.
It's like it's weird. Like you wouldn't expect this to like have gross economic repercussions, and I think most of the economic repercussions have nothing to do with the Queen's death. I think it's just the global economy and its current status.
Is it just that like they have to reprint the money and that's what's going to cause the problem? I mean, because wasn't there the whole shit with Modi like a couple years ago where he just decided out of the blue, oh, we're just going to change the currency system. Fuck it. I don't care about the repercussions. Let's just do it. Fuck it.
I think I kind of remember that, but I mean, how much could that really, I mean, like, that's gotta be like a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, there's no way like that's gonna like set the economy back, like having to reprint your currency.
Especially if it's just a topical change, right? Like, I know they're not going to do the thing Modi did with the timetable where it's like, it's 1 week to change everything. And if you get fucked, you get fucked. I'm pretty sure it's just any old bill you get to the bank, quietly shred it and put a new one in circulation. I'm sure it can't be that hard.
Yeah, one would think.
I don't know. I don't know economics. I don't know. Treasury and monetary stuff always has been the most confusing thing to me, right? It's just like, what about this other than like pure convention is gumming up the works, you know? But
and like so much of it too is it's like, it's so much of it's like kind of like fake money anyways. Like once you get to a certain point, like it's not real. Like it's just
I mean, if you consider stuff like, especially with like how much of transactions from personal accounts are done over cards or through e-payments.
Right, like does the currency even like have much like real function anymore too? I mean, that's kind of another conversation to have altogether, and
right,
maybe they'll just embrace that. Like Charles will be the first digital monarch.
Right. I mean, I don't know.
He literally knows he can't be bothered to move paperweights off of his desk,
Jesus, in not getting an episode out, we didn't even get to mention just like all the weird shit about Prince Charles ascending to the throne, right? And like, I just remember like immediately as soon as he's like set to take the stage, there's this coverage on BBC of him like, he's ready to position himself as the people's king, a man of the people, as it were. And then immediately, not even 12 hours later, there's that like video of him just like impudently hissing at like a manservant to like get a paperweight off of it. And it's like, what?
It's like, could you look more out of like, not the man of the people?
What rare bone disease does he have that a paperweight's going to take him out? What's going on here?
Well, then there was like all the stuff too, and like some of it's just like, I don't want to get too much into like how people look and whatnot, because I feel like it's a lot of it's just kind of like, it's hard to tell what's real and what isn't. But you've got like, oh, he's got gout. Look at those hands, and you see like the same stuff with like Putin.
Oh, he had Mitch McConnell
cancer.
It's that thing about Mitch McConnell's fingers and like.
To be fair, those were pretty shocking. I mean,
he had some andouille sausage over there. What the fuck was going on?
Yeah, it was like McConnell had like black hands for a bit. Like that was.
It's the kind of thing, right? It's just like the whole lizard people stuff, like necro wizards running the government. You think like, oh, that's kind of gratuitous. Then you see that picture and you're like, I don't know how to feel. I really don't know how to feel. But yeah, Liz Truss. I think the most egregious part of her tenure, aside from the low approval rating and that really funny moment of like her meeting the king and him just being like, oh dear, as soon as she walks in. There was something really weird she was saying about like fuel prices or like natural gas usage, where she was just like, just put a blanket on, who cares?
I don't recall that.
Something. Let me look this up. This is oh, by the way, to the listener, I have done zero prep. You're lucky I even pulled up a couple articles for this one.
I was a little disappointed. I was for one of the articles that we're going to talk about. Unfortunately, New York Times. I don't know what the article count they actually let you look at.
They let you look at one. They let you look at one.
Okay, because it's like I'm like, man, it used to be like I used to be able to like look at this, all day, and then like we were done. But it's like now it's like, what the fuck's going on?
Okay. Let's see if this is the one. This is from The Guardian. Liz Truss wants to inflict more austerity on Britain.
I mean, that's not popular, but I mean, so is like what's the difference between that and what any other conservative prime minister is going to do?
I mean, forget the conservative ones. I mean, any UK prime minister post Thatcher has been in that austerity model, right? And I think I don't know. Like, I know that her statement was not well received, but how is this any different from like anything Rishi Sunak is going to say? You know what I mean? Maybe
I think like too, it's like when you have like the certain I mean, it's basically like the Jimmy Carter thing, right? It's someone's in power in like kind of a bad economic period, and like I'm not saying that that's like sort of excuses their actions, but like when you're using this free market laissez-faire attitude and you're trying to as Carter did as well, try to govern with austerity and whatnot, because got to keep inflation down. That doesn't really help anyone.
Yeah. I mean, the reality of the Volcker shock is that how do you sell neoliberalism as anything positive other than like the Reagan vision of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is fuck it. Just get what you want. Just turn it into a consumer gangland.
Yeah.
So yeah, after Liz Truss has left, nothing has fundamentally changed except shocker.
Your boy.
Yeah, one of my chosen people, Indians. Rishi Sunak, who, if people aren't familiar, and I was just reading this earlier, I'm not too familiar with all the details. Apparently, he was one of the conservative members of parliament who resigned during the whole scandal with Boris Johnson.
Oh my god!
And might have been like the ringleader of that whole parliamentary maneuver.
Oh my god!
So this was like a very I don't know if like this was like a long con or if this was just like him waiting patiently in the wings, or
not that patiently.
I mean, hey, 6 weeks is 6 weeks. You know what I mean?
Jeez.
So yeah, I guess again, another one of these internal, secretive, whatever party decision apparatuses happens. He gets in, and he's definitely one of the more I don't know. I'm always suspicious of any like right wing politician who's like openly a member of a conservative party, right? But it's kind of getting me like how normal he seems.
I mean, he's apparently enthusiastic about the history of Coca-Cola. I don't know if that's
Who isn't.
Fair enough.
But yeah, no, that's his official alumni. Okay, honestly, this episode is just going to be like pulling up our DM and just like looking at all the memes we've sent each other in the past like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that one you don't have to dig too far. At least that was about a couple hours ago.
Yeah. So this is his alumni profile for, I think, Stanford when he was an MBA student at Stanford in 2006.
Yeah.
So under skills and interests, he has listed Star Wars, sports.
Unclear if he means the franchise or the missile defense program.
That's he should have specified.
Sports.
sports, especially Southampton
Sports.
football. I, who is a Southampton FC fan? I don't get this.
And then the history of Coca-Cola.
The history of Coca-Cola, is he talking about like the CIA funding death squads to shut down striking sugar workers, or
To be fair, that was one of the in the comment thread of that post. You do see someone post.
yeah, the Cola Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
I
not
collect Coca-Cola things. I'm a Coke addict. Total Coke addict.
that's such a weird thing. That's even weirder than like Joe Biden and ice cream, Loki.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Joe Biden of ice cream, it's just always like, it's just a quick and easy thing, right? He's there with the ice cream. He's licking it. He wants you out of the way. He's like, I'm here for ice cream. I'm not here for your stupid questions.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, this I mean, I don't know, for an Indian prime minister to be the first pagan prime minister the United Kingdom has had in what, 1,000 years?
Yeah, something like that.
So on Diwali of all days too. That's representation is one of those things I'm really cynical about, but I got to take every W I can, right?
Right? I mean, yeah. I mean, you've got. I mean,
like he's gonna disappoint me in a week. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah. I mean, well, let's see if he'll probably have to resign when Northern Northern Ireland secedes. But it's all a small price to pay.
it's also like a bit of small fries, you know what I mean? Because didn't Ireland also get like their prime minister to be a brown guy, Leo Varadkar?
I don't remember. I mean, not. Yeah, you're more learned on the history of the prime ministers than I am.
Yeah, no, they have a half Indian I don't know how to pronounce the name of that office. I just know that that's prime minister. And yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess all of the Brexit people worried about brown people invading the country might have had a point.
Hey, isn't that kind of funny though that like leading the party that's gonna have to, and like he's gonna be the supervisor of Brexit, even though like the people that voted for Brexit primarily did so out of like racial fear and other nonsense.
I like the thing about it, and this is something I'm saying as like a passive observer of this, and also just as someone on the outside, right? Is like it seemed to have been fueled by similar, if not the same, culture war forces that we keep talking about here, right?
Yeah.
Except like, and I mean, again, like this is me as an American not keeping up with any of this, not barely following up with the coverage of this stuff when it was hot, right? Does anyone even like want it now? They've had like what 10 like referendums on it now at this point. Does anyone really care if it happens or not?
Have they even had that many? I don't know. I feel like it's probably no longer like.
I'm exaggerating by 10. I don't know how many.
Yeah, I mean, that's my intuition. It's probably not seen as that important anymore. I mean, I could be wrong, but like, yeah, I mean, they can probably try to weasel their way out of doing it if they really want to.
Yeah, it's I don't know because like this is probably a point we're going to revisit when we get to our U.S. coverage, right? But it probably should be stressed that like, what is the conservative project at this day and age other than just either cruelty or some kind of desperate filibustering for no reason other than its own, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you said, that's definitely going to be kind of the overarching topic for like a lot of these, and I mean, it's wild to me too because, and this is kind of like a generalized point that I've noticed with a lot of these races is, and especially like even for the ballot initiatives, it feels like they're running away from their own values in a lot of ways.
Yeah, if not running away, like diluting it down to like one arena, or like coasting off of like Trump's momentum and here in the United States
Yeah,
at
and
least.
like the only thing, and like I mean, and to be honest, like I actually have no idea really what the like polling looks like as far as like acceptance of like transgender people, right? Like I mean, like I have no idea. Like I don't think they're probably as widely supported as like same sex marriage and stuff like that. But that seems to be like the one social issue that they've really just like put their hand.
That is
They've drawn the line in
it.
the sand. It's like that's the one issue, and it's like it has to be the only one they feel is like remotely popular.
But
And I don't know if that's actually rooted in like anything.
it's the one thing that's made hay all year. If you like, if anyone's been paying attention to like domestic politics coverage, and like between like some of the Supreme Court stuff, between different like state legislatures and stuff, and I guess just the malaise that we're living in, right?
Hmm.
We've talked about this at length, that like both parties fundamentally have nothing they really want to change about the structure of the state to a certain degree,
Yeah.
its role in regulating business. Maybe there's some topical differences, but broadly, we've had one party neoliberalism from our governments now. um when it comes to regulating the role of violence, domestically or abroad, we are, if we're not exporting weapons to other countries, we're definitely getting new guns and vehicles and equipment for police across the country, right? So in such a system, in such an environment, what can you do other than turn any other thing, like even with the pandemic, not to shift gears too far, right?
Hmm.
The pandemic was like an actual like public health arena, right? And there was a lot of like confusion and a lot of like, I'm not giving anti-vaxxers or anti-lockdown people some ammo here, right? What I am saying though is like there is like a kind of contradiction at the heart of like the level of state intervention happening all of a sudden, right?
Yeah,
And
and I
this,
and I think there's that, and I think too, there's a lot of people like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan who've like kind of said that like with hindsight and like the information they've had in hindsight, they wouldn't have gone that far.
yeah, and it's I don't know, because like the narrative on COVID has always been changing, and I think it's one of those, the reason why people either hate to talk about it or have like certain annoying quirks when they talk about COVID, or just like why like it's something people seem to avoid anymore, right?
Hmm.
Not that like I'm the COVID understander. I again, if we lived in a just and moral society, I wouldn't be doing this show. You know,
Sure, yeah.
um, it's like political expediency was at the heart of everything in the early stages of things. The lockdowns were unpopular from the jump. Um, the the confusion around like what to do and like how to treat things, vaccine access and availability was always under question. uh the question of essential workers, like there's a bunch of like dependencies that come out of this public health crisis,
And there was a
And it,
lot of political questions that emerged that I think had never really been like entertained, or at least had not been entertained in the United States in a really long time. You know, the
yeah,
concept of like essential workers and stuff like that. Like all these things were sort of like they're really not revolutionary concepts, but at that like they seemed that way just because of how like divorced they are from like the mainstream um political conversation.
yeah, and that's the whole thing here, right? Is that a moment of crisis can expose the fundamental flaws in a system, but like we're talking about, it exposes like economic disparities. It exposes dysfunctions, or lack of contingencies in certain public administrative functions or what have you. You can't address that in our system, so it gets turned into like either you're a chud who doth protest too much, or you are a lib sissy cuck who is going to get injected with microchips. And there was no fucking in between. And that's like what everything fucking turns into, right? To the point of even like I don't know, like the whole thing about how trans people have become the new target of the right. It's entirely confusing, right? Because like we said earlier, the average person doesn't even know what they're talking about oftentimes with this trans discourse. It's this kind of issue that was
Well, it's
kind
the
of
type of thing that like they can really warp certain ideas and imagery into something that's like really fucked up, and like that's like something where they're like, oh, like they believe in like mutilating kids, and it's like
right.
even with the procedures that they're talking about, I'm pretty sure those are not legal to perform at like a certain age.
Right. And I mean that's the kind of thing too, right? Is like there's so much disinformation that's gone around about on the subject because of how politically charged it's become, right? Like
Hmm.
concepts that are standard practice, like informed consent for care, the level of like restrictions on like hormone replacement therapy, stuff like that, the amount of counseling that goes into this, uh and just like I don't know, the varying like stories and known issues of like family trauma regarding acceptance, or like conversely, the resources that you provide a family who is accepting, right?
Hmm.
We're not even at like a common thread of like the issues that face what I honestly believe is just yet another group of people. Congratulations, there's a different set of information. Grow up. I'm sorry, that's life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see anything crazy about that, but it's once again been turned into this new I don't like this term that's coming out of my mouth because I don't have a better one, but it's a new plaything for the right. Basically, it's a new set of people for them to victimize and bully, and the varying strands of the Democratic coalition have to choose how strongly they're going to toe the line, what angle they're going to do it under. Um, are you going to be a Hillary Clinton and say it's a boutique issue? Are you going to be like one of the few principled people who can say that like it's a matter of human rights, or are you just going to do the thing where it's like you can dismiss your opponent as transphobic when asked or when pushed on it, but fundamentally, you're comfortable with relegating, queer politics to the blue states and kind of, leaving these kind of harder button issues, for another day, right?
Sure, yeah, I think that's kind of the thing too, and I think it's like when you talk to like some people who are, they happen to be Republicans in the electorate about this. And it's like, it's one of those things too, where I think that like Democrats sort of struggle with, where do they come down on it? Because like, sometimes they get, and I think to some extent I think they're just kind of cowardly on every issue, right? They're just, they're afraid of being called a socialist. They're afraid of being called, too friendly to the queers or whatever. Like it's, they're afraid of all this stuff, and it's like, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter what position you take. That will always be how you're painted at. Because like I know I've talked to people where they're just like, oh, the Democrats, they want to like reassign all our genders and whatnot, and there's like absolutely insane things. But it's like, this is just the level of like insanity and disformation that you're dealing with, and like it's a unfortunate thing that I think there really hasn't been strong efforts to really diffuse, and we're seeing it blow up, in our faces again with the way January 6th is being sort of relitigated over and over again on the right, especially where it's either it's not really a problem or it's fake news or whatever. There was nothing wrong. It was peaceful protest, and like all of this gaslighting, play the title card, and it's just it's like all this stuff, and it's like I think that's like something that they've struggled to reckon with, pretty much from Bill Clinton on, right? He's like, oh, let's, reinvent ourselves as Republican light. And, what's the right gonna, they can't possibly call us tax and spend liberals then, right? What are they gonna do, lie?
Which is, I guess, the greatest win of the evangelicals,
Yeah.
By turning it into culture war, you've effectively diffused any challenge to the status quo in a way.
Yeah, I mean, like the more we like, continue to like fight over like these issues that, like, it's like how much political capital do you, and I mean, and it's like it sucks having to like talk about it in that way, because it's like, these are like real people and like they have real interests and whatnot, but it's like, if you're like, well, between that or like universal health care that would also benefit those people, what do you exert? I mean, not that they're exerting capital on that, but like, what do you exert like your political capital on? And it's, you have to keep doing these fights over issues that should be non-issues.
Right. It's again, like, I think we talked about, COVID as a public health crisis, moment being turned into a culture war issue.
Mm-hmm.
You have trans rights being an issue of human rights, also being diffused into the culture war. And even I think like, I'm really running the risk of like saying the same shit in every episode, but
every episode someone's first.
You know what? I'm just gonna come out. I mean, I'm coming out. Cue the sound. Anyways, if my analysis remains the same, I think it's because nothing is changing to a certain extent, and it's kind of like we are fundamentally circumscribed by the system we're stuck in, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the arena. This is the state of play. And if I keep coming back to this, it's because like American political discourse, the different arenas and discursive spaces that host it, the various players that operate within it, so on and so forth, they are processing it through the culture war filter, to the point that even like questions of like what is the efficacy of voting, it gets turned into a all or nothing thing, the way the culture war will spit something out. The question of talking about the Supreme Court's rule in it, it's like, well, either you support it or you don't. And I don't know, at some level it's like you could even tie this to like past discussions we've had about American civic religion, and how like maybe we could start talking about like how any questioning of it turns into like a moment of apostasy, right?
I mean, I think that's like, a good tie into a lot of like these midterm things, because I think that's becoming increasingly the battleground, is the idea of the civic religion, and really redefining it in really grotesque ways, I think. One of the big points I noticed with DeSantis's debate, I believe Dixon made similar points in hers as well. But the idea that they're trying to teach you to be un-American in schools. Like they teach you that we were made from that. This country was built from stolen land. It's like, well, newsflash. And I was talking to my brother about this earlier today too, and it's like. I mean, I know I'm almost 10 years removed from the public education system, right? I graduated high school in 2013. And it's I find it hard to believe things have radically changed in 10 years. But I would hardly describe my education as woke by any definition.
I would even struggle to define current education as woke. I mean, for crying out loud, right? This all keeps resurging at certain phases because the culture war is cyclical in a way, right?
Yeah.
And I think you might remember the AP US history curriculum wanting to be changed in certain states because the curriculum mentions very plainly, not even criticizing it, right? Things like sharecropping, imperialism in the Philippines.
Yeah.
I'm sure an enterprising young conservative freak could probably find a way to spin that into something they could feel proud of if they wanted to. God forbid they do. I don't think anyone should. But it's just the kind of thing where it's I don't want to do that hokey thing where it's now look who's triggered, now look who's sensitive, look who's the snowflake. I don't want to do that, but there is something to be said about how there is this mythology that people hold on to dearly that is fundamentally a lie, right? And I think there is just something mature about just just learning a little bit about that and being okay, feels bad to cast this off, but I can let it go. Maybe be better tomorrow. I don't know what's wrong with that, and I don't know where that comes from, other than again, not to sound too woke here, but the cruelty at the heart of the American empire in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with these elections, it's un-American. What are we defining as American here? What is consensus reality at this point when it's this strongly divided?
Yeah, I don't think there is much of a consensus reality, and it's insane. Where it's the things that they're having issues with, it's oh, you can't talk about slavery and whatnot. It's what, what version of history can we teach? Oh, hey, here's the revolution. We went to war over taxes. You don't need to know anything else about that. But taxes, that's the reason that we're gonna run with in our civic culture. And then we fought some bad guys in some world wars. The Nazis. Well, actually, I mean, are they bad guys? I don't know. And it's just it's weird to the point where it's well, what's even on the table?
Nothing other than the perpetuation of the culture war at this point. Because I mean, I don't know if we're at the point where you have to listen to some guy's dumb podcast to hear about things like the political economy of the planter South, or imperialist.
I mean, let's be fair. That
right?
stuff is pretty much almost never discussed.
Right.
In advanced placement courses is the only thing where you'll even entertain oh yeah, there was the colonialism and stuff like that. You don't talk about that stuff in a normal high school education, and definitely not before.
Right. And even then, it's how often has the teacher dwelled on the subject, especially I'll just say in a public school setting. Yeah, I was very lucky. I had a AP US history teacher who talked about it for a day.
Yeah.
But it's a public school setting. He had to rush through that shit. We didn't even get to make it to the
Well,
80s.
and
You know
yeah,
what I
and
mean?
like some of it's like it's not like necessarily to like bury these teachers and say that like oh they're really bad at their job. Like I mean I liked mine as well. I mean it's just, I mean there's so much to go through the nature of the curriculum. Like I get
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
but like it's just the idea that it's like oh like they're teaching and like teaching our quote unquote kids these like awful anti-American ideas. It's like you're not touching any of this stuff till like at the earliest like sophomore year of high school. Like,
Yeah.
do you really consider that person a kid?
I don't know. I don't know. Because I think like this is another recurring theme. We still have to jump to the election coverage, but maybe it's good we're taking this diversion here, right? Is this idea of like parents don't have enough control, right? That's kind of a leftover of the original satanic panic and like
Yeah.
the advent of all that stuff, right? Where it's like what are these teachers teaching our kids, kind of near hysteric panic in my opinion, right?
Well, it's
And
weird like how much it's reverted back to that. Like, I mean, like, because that was like one thing where I think as a culture we kind of looked back on it with like maybe not some level of shame, but it's just like, but like some level of like hilarity, right? Like these people are like a parody. These like it's hard to imagine them being real, and yet like we're relitigating this.
yeah, I mean, like even last year with the fucking what was it, the Youngkin election in Virginia, right? Like,
Yeah.
how profitable was the discussion on CRT?
Mm-hmm.
God forbid that like CRT, like once you like read into it, it barely pops into college level courses, let alone a high school setting. God.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Like we've talked about this on the show before, right? Where it's like this just seems like a very like suburban voter focus kind of thing. But also like it's I don't know.
Well, I mean that's what happens when the electoral discourse focuses on quote unquote swing voters.
Yeah.
It's just code for suburban voter because they're the ones who aren't like that. Politics isn't necessarily as important for them on average because win or if you're upper middle class, win or lose, your preferred party, your life's not fundamentally changing.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, what fundamental like care do you have other than like trying to keep your kids out of downward mobility,
Yeah, and I think that even like, and that's why I like said upper middle class because it's like I think they're not even as concerned about that. Like, I mean, lower middle class, sure, like there's the idea that you might, you're a little bit insecure about job prospects and things like that, but
yeah, it's just overall, I don't know. Like, it's fascinating to me that like this same cohort of Americans can, log into Netflix and watch the newest season of Stranger Things, where literally they have a satanic panic story arc, right? And then not, consider for a moment the irony.
yeah, well, especially because like it's like like that's fun for the whole family, right? Get like
Yeah.
you're watching through your kid, and you're not thinking like, am I the bad guy?
No, it's the kids who are wrong.
Yeah. Literally, like I mean, it's
yeah. I don't know. Just it's like I don't know what project the right has. We've kind of talked at length about how Democrats are kind of either fumbling the bag or they might have some kind of strong but limited pitch at certain times, or they're just.
and I mean, like they also just have like the issue of like I think a overly large umbrella, which I mean maybe that's part of the issue with the right as well, but like I don't feel that way, right? It's like all you're like, it's because they're just too afraid to like openly put out their ideas because they know they're unpopular. I mean, even like abortion, which like in that can be how we can tie back into like the Michigan midterm race, because that's probably one of the big issues. It's on the ballot. We have proposal 3, I believe, is the abortion one, and
Yeah.
like I was shocked. Like so, like um probably the most played ad this election has been like you've probably seen it, is like the Tudor Dixon one, where it's just a direct quote from her from that podcast about how like a 14-year-old incest victim is like the perfect person to like be forced to carry a child to term.
And that weird chuckle she did while saying it too.
Yeah, and it's really weird. So like, and they have gotten a lot of mileage out of that. They just keep playing it, and you know what, like Republicans in far redder states were destroyed for saying similar things in prior election cycles.
Yeah.
Like worse election cycles for Democrats too. So like I would imagine that this race isn't super close, but even then you have her like really making this concerted effort to say, well, the governor doesn't really have anything to do with abortion. Well, I'll respect whatever people vote on for proposal 3, but you can still vote for that and get rid of Whitmer. And it's so weird to see, like, it's like, I thought this was like a human rights issue. I thought that was always the argument. I thought we were really concerned about what's happening to the unborn. But now it doesn't sound like that. Now it sounds like
own the libs kind of shit, pretty much.
Now it's like it's this political football to own the libs, but we don't really care that much. And I've been asked about that in the interview too. He's like, well, she said that the governors don't really have anything to do with that. I'm like, it's disingenuous at the very least to say that. I mean, that's like saying that the president's not involved with like any number of policy things, right? Like they obviously influence the legislature. She obviously could choose to pass a law, if she promotes the legislature to, oh, hey, let's ban abortion statewide. I mean, she would sign it. She would play an active role in lobbying it. To say that she doesn't play a role at all is kind of delusional. And especially considering we've seen how Whitmer's played with this as well, where she, put in like those court orders to freeze, the law that would have been unforced otherwise.
Right. And it's also like to say that the governor has no role. I mean, let's just talk, right? Is like this is a bit of a sidebar, but in Florida, right, there was a ballot initiative to legalize restoring voting rights to felons. DeSantis was the first person to put a block in it, to the point that basically the entire program gets voted for, and then he basically renders this ballot initiative toothless. So I don't believe for a minute that any Republican governor would look at a ballot initiative they find unsavory and play the principled card and be like, well,
exactly.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's if anyone has been paying attention to the past 4 years, what are we, The guy said he was
probably an unnecessary limitation. I mean, you could look back even further than that.
I mean, you could look at the founding of the country if you want to get woke, right? But I digress. It's another weird naive thing, right? Where it's like, especially in like polite spaces about politics, you can't call someone a liar, you can't call someone disingenuous.
Yeah, and it's always like, and even like, I always said for like the longest time it's worse to like call someone a racist than for them to be racist. It's like the same exact thing. Like you can't like actually call people out because that's like divisive and mean.
It's like so what? Let me be wrong if that's the case, right? What does me saying this have to, what's so wrong about me saying it other than, oh, you're trying to hide something here? So yeah, and let's get to the Prop 3 specifically. Now, like let's really get on track with that, right? Mm-hmm. This is a pretty milquetoast provision.
By that you mean confusing and extreme, right?
First of all, that's the stupidest thing. Like, okay, like I don't get much cable in my area, so like I haven't seen a lot of the TV ads. What I did see are like the fucking yard signs and like different if not the yard signs, like the big ones in rural areas too. I was traveling up north for a bit and I saw some of those. The biggest one they're going with now is like Prop 3 is too extreme and too confusing. Like, are you guys saying you can't read?
Yes.
Is that the okay? There we go. Because I think they're starting to realize that like the life, what is it, like protect life argument can only get you so far these days, right? That like they're just trying to like say like, oh, this infringes. I think the other disingenuous one was this infringes on family rights.
Yeah,
Which ones?
I haven't
Which
seen
ones?
that one.
Like,
I haven't seen that one as commonly, but yeah, you're right. It's like this whole like right to life. That argument is like gone to bed, and like I've like even like some of like the party agents that I'm still I would hesitate to call friends, but
Facebook
still I'm
friends
like
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, like Facebook friends, like they're even like just kind of like, well, it's confusing, it's extreme or whatever, and like even it's like regardless of what you feel about abortion, it's extreme. It's like, what if I believe in like post 5-year out of the womb abortion? Then it's like hardly extreme, right? Like, what if that is my position? You can't say regardless of my position, it's extreme.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's the usual bullshit they all get into. But I mean, let's read this extreme text. Okay, so this is from Bridge, Michigan's article explaining what the proposal would do. I'm just gonna cherry pick what from a paragraph here. Proposal 3, sponsored by Reproductive Freedom for All, would amend the Michigan Constitution to guarantee that every individual in the state has a fundamental right to reproductive freedom. That would include the right to make decisions about abortion, but also prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, miscarriage management, and fertility care. Again, pretty common around the world at this point. I don't see what's controversial here. Still allow elected officials to prohibit or otherwise regulate abortion after a fetus reaches viability. However, the state could not prohibit any abortions that a medical professional deems necessary to protect the life or physical or mental health of the pregnant individual. So again, like
Mental health one I thought was interesting.
Right. So it's I guess this is the whole thing here, right? Is that if this is what they're citing as the confusing part, it still doesn't add up to me because this is still like a sop to the right. This is basically their concession here, which is like, fine, you guys want to make an input here, we'll let you make an input here. They didn't even have to add this to the ballot initiative, and they did, which I personally feel like kneecaps the initiative. But any sensible right winger would be like, okay, fine, we can put in our shoe here, but
well, and that's the thing,
nobody wants to work anymore.
Well, this issue has like it's no longer like a compromise issue, right? It's like you either like
it's all or nothing. Yeah,
they've pretty much admitted that now, right? It's like like no exceptions. It's all or nothing.
Yep. Okay, we got 2 more points here. So, only allow the state to restrict abortion rights if the restrictions are justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means.
No, admittedly, that's actually the most confusing thing.
But even then, that's like I'm sorry,
direction.
like that's a legislature full of lawyers. They all know what that means.
Yeah,
they all know, like, okay, try not to invade too much personal privacy here. Got it. And I'm sure like they could basically get away with violating it if they wanted to. Like,
that's the line that lets them kind of get away with it.
Yeah,
right? Like that's the only part that I think is confusing, and it's explicitly like.
But this is confusing the citizens. Yeah,
like that's throwing a bone to like the right.
Yeah, so 2 bones have been thrown to the right already. And then the last one here, prohibit the state from penalizing or prosecuting an individual based on actual, potential, perceived, or alleged pregnancy outcomes, including abortion, miscarriages, and stillbirths. So I mean, if it's confusing because it's written in legalese, sure. But
we've got news for you about all ballot petitions.
Right. I mean, again, just like this is like 3 out of the 4 points I've mentioned are basically like concessions to the right. And the protections that it does enumerate, if passed, are like common sense, uncontroversial in most of the
pretty
world.
Much the ones that were under Roe v. Wade.
Right. And again, like this is another point that I keep getting at, right? Is that the Supreme Court cannot be relied on anymore as like, you can't just have like a a decision be your legal backdoor to continue something. You got to get it enumerated as a practice. And I feel like that's been the big thing for like LGBT protections, abortion rights. And I am worried about like how they plan on gaming this out in the courts. But all that aside, it's a bullshit argument that this is confusing or extreme.
Yeah, it's the lowest hanging fruit you can possibly like throw at something.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's a massive concession that you know that your argument, if you don't know that it's wrong, you know that at least no one buys it or cares anymore.
Yeah. Anyone who was convinced with like the fetus on the dime pictures at this point, like that's everyone is already there. Everyone else has either tuned it out or is like trying not to look at it or has gone pro-choice. You know what I mean? Like it's frustrating to look at this shit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and the fact that like that's Tudor Dixon's only fucking like thing she's really like, you know, sticking to, right? Like she can talk about like supporting business. That just means the usual tax break shit. We all know what that means at this point. I'm trying to think.
It's weird too because I felt like she could have maybe had a better shot if she just kept trying to relitigate Whitmer's COVID policies,
Which is what
really
Garrett
isn't.
Soldano was doing. That's what I thought. That's why I thought Soldano was going to win the primary, because he was relitigating COVID and he was trying to do the whole like government overreach thing, which I thought at least meant something in Republican circles. Turns out you don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah, I thought it was really weird that like because I was like, well, like this was your one shot at when, and you know, again, it's like something that voters probably forgot or whatever, but like it was just weird to me because I was like, well, this is the way she can do it, and like during the debate, which I know they've got the second one tonight, but their first one, it was just a weird thing to watch, and like talking about, and like some of it, like the moderator asked like a dumb question, which was like, you know, Governor Whitmer, in hindsight, would you do things differently? And she's like, yeah. But again, like, you know, she defended her choices because it was a novel virus, you know, the whole shebang. But then I asked, like, Dixon, like, with just the information we had at the time, would you have done things differently? It's like, like, how can you honestly answer that?
I'm kind of glad I didn't get press passes to this one. I would probably just, I'd be making a ruckus in the back.
Oh, I mean, it's probably, yeah. I mean, and the first one was a lot less fun than a lot of these other ones I've been watching. Like, there's the Walker debate. Oh my God, that
But
was.
he pulled out the police badge. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Or then the Wisconsin one. That was also funny too.
Yeah, the Ron Johnson one where like he like so, and I would talk about this with my students actually, and I was like, this is a very similar thing. Like this is something that like candidates always get asked, where it's like, you know, say one thing positive about your opponent. Or they don't always, but they usually do. And I was like, this is something that happened in the 2016, the second debate between Trump and Hillary.
Yeah.
Where like they refused to shake hands and whatnot. And then they're like, well, say one thing positive about each other. And it was like just the low hanging fruit, their family. Well, you really care for your family. I think that's admirable. And so, of course, the Democrat does the same thing for the Republican. Then Ron Johnson comes back with, well, I think he was raised well, but I just don't understand why he would betray this country.
Right, and then immediately
And
booed.
betray them.
Immediately booed. Like,
Yeah, it was like, wow. Like, and because it was like, oh, his family, and then he's talking about his parents. It's like, well, that's kind of a weird like angle to specifically emphasize. He's like, yeah, I think they raised him well, except now he betrayed this country. Like, why would you do such a thing? It's like, what the hell?
which also just seems like a backhanded compliment. Like when an older white guy like tells a black man younger than him, like, oh, he was raised well. I'm like, what are you saying here?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, this I didn't plan on talking about this too much, but like some of the language that these GOP candidates are whipping out, like there was the Rubio canvasser that was attacked, which seems to be for no political reason, but the guy, for what it's worth, is like a known like neo-Nazi, but he's like, he was attacked by 4 animals. I'm like, holy shit. Like,
like four actual like non-humans, or what happened? Like,
well, it was that he was attacked in a Latino neighborhood, and there were no
what?
animals involved in the attack.
Oh, fuck me. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I'm like attacked by 4 animals. Like, what? What are we? What are you saying?
What? Did you get attacked by gators? What happened here? Like, what is going?
Yeah, I was like, holy shit! Like, we're just like calling like people animals. Like, what the?
Well, it's just a leftover of like the 2020 BLM protests, right? Where it's just like anyone who threatens a right winger with violence is like deranged in some way. But also,
They can, they've got a green flag to threaten violence on anyone.
What was the fucking Tom? Was it Tom Cotton who said that shit about give them no quarter?
I think so. That sounds like Tom Cotton.
Demons, ghouls, all of them. God. Oh God. Okay. Of all the Senate races, I have to say by far Herschel Walker and Dr. Oz have been the most entertaining from the Republican pack.
Oh,
for
yeah.
varying reasons. Oz is especially surprising to me, right? That like this man has had so much TV training, literally had a syndicated show, and like cannot film something organically for the life of him.
It's so weird, and like it just hit me when you were talking about it that I was like, yeah, his TV show was primarily for like upper, like 30s and up, like stay-at-home moms, right? That was who watched the show. That was when it was, on. That was basically who it was scheduled to, right? It basically just took over like the Oprah Winfrey time slot.
It's under her network, yeah.
Is it under her network?
Yeah, it's through OWN. Let me look it up, but I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay, because it was on ABC first. But I wasn't
sure.
Sure.
Not her TV channel, but like her production company, I mean.
Okay. Maybe it was. But it's like, so he has that, like, you'd think he would have like that demographic in the bag, right? Like these suburbanite moms. But then his campaign has decided they want to pursue like a younger demographic.
Created by Oprah Winfrey. I'm surprised. I am surprised.
Interesting. I'm surprised she didn't like, well, maybe I shouldn't be. I was surprised she didn't like condemn him more thoroughly, other than just like, yeah, I'm not going to endorse him. Which is like, yeah, it's a little scathing, but like, do you really want to be like, you're the guy, you're the one who brought him into like the scene? Like, you really want to like, don't you think you should like distance yourself from that in some way? Like, express some regret, like, or anything? Like, do you care? But yeah, so like he has been like trying to like cater to this, like, I guess a younger demographic with like just the worst meme ads that he could possibly come up with.
Yeah, the Finance Bro ad that you sent me, that's so fucking weird.
Oh my God. Yeah, the Finance Bro one. So that was his ad against Dave McCormick, who was his primary opponent. And like, it's all about how he's like this China bro, this finance bro guy, and he's from out of Pennsylvania, which is like, so is he. So, like,
right.
Why are we drawing attention to this? But even like, there's like the one ad he has for Fetterman where he's like, look at his eye, look at his brain, and it's like this like old school, like what you'd see on like a PowerPoint graphic, where it's just like his head opens up and like weed comes out and stuff like that. It's just like, who are you trying to appeal to?
Oh God. Oh no. And then let's not even forget like that disastrous video of him like walking through the grocery store.
Oh right? Yeah, where he's like, "Oh man, this costs how much?"
But first of all, just like, it's like a crudité board he's trying to build, but then he gets salsa with it. So like, I'm already like, who in Pennsylvania is eating a crudité board? Let's start there. Who? Then like he got the name of the store wrong, and it's basically the Pennsylvania equivalent of something like a Myers. So like, immediately like people are like singling him out as like, of course you don't live in Pennsylvania. Like, why would I even? And then just like how out of touch it looked, right? That's like this rich guy at a grocery store going for shit that people do, like, already don't go for and stuff. To try to make like a ham-fisted point about inflation. What he does even do is like weird. Like he does it. I think he picks a leaf off of something when he shouldn't have. He should have just picked up the whole thing. Very unhinged, very weird behavior from him, for sure.
Yeah, it's so wild. And like, I mean, the Fetterman like campaign, I mean, it's just like, it's going at like, and I talked about this in my class where I was contrasting the campaigns. I was like, people were like, well, he's going after like Oz more from like this stylistic standpoint, right? He's like talking about how he's like a bad person or he's like out of touch. It's like, well, to be fair, that's more like he's only running on like vague ideas. He's not running on substance. So you have to attack that lack of substance with a similar lack of substance, because like, and like, it's so weird where it's just like the Fetterman campaign is basically just like outsourced its own ads to just like, here's Oz doing stuff because he's like so
he's
out
like a
of touch.
reverse meme candidate, basically. Like I don't know. Like Fetterman's record is kind of weird to me, but like he has enough cred to at least like brand himself as like a Democrat to old kinds of Democrats kind of guy. Like he could bill himself as a progressive to certain camps. He can bill himself as an establishment guy to other camps. He can kind of bill himself as like a blue collar guy to different blue collar stuff. You know what I mean? Like maybe the campaign is doing that. I'm not following this race closely at all, right? But you are right that it's what is he offering other than like I look like a WWE reject, vote for me.
Well, I mean, he does have some other like ideas and whatnot, but it's like so I would say like on his end of the campaign, he has like campaigned on like more of the definitely I would say probably to the left of like the modal Democrat.
Usually, yeah.
And yeah, I think like it's not necessarily like but as far as like the attacks, right? It's like he's not like so much attacking Oz on like, well, Oz has these really bad ideas. It's just that like he's rich and out of touch, and by extension, you can assume he probably has bad ideas, which I think speaks probably like I think it's probably better than like a lot of these more technocratic approaches that Democrats seem to favor.
I mean, it is like the Trump technique writ large, right? Which is like, if you make your opponent look more corny than you.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of it.
Like, and that's not to say that Trump isn't corny. I find him to be like among the corniest people ever to have walked the planet, right? But it's like the fact that he can look like the alpha in the room next to Jeb Bush, which keep in mind this is a room of just like a nightmare blunt rotation, like you do not want to spend time with any of the guys on that debate stage.
No.
The fact that Trump is like able to market himself as like charismatic, approachable, cool, not bothered by anyone's bullshit. Bizarre, very bizarre. You know what I mean? And it's like,
and then it's like you look at like the crop of like people that have risen to sort of take his mantle, and it's like, maybe it's not so bizarre after all.
Right. And I mean, maybe Fetterman's touching on a thread there because, he's pointing out very correctly that, like, yeah, this guy, Dr. Oz, is corny. And speaking of guys who want to, brand themselves as Trump adjacent, but cannot get that same kind of juice.
Yeah, so Ron DeSantis, so last night, I think it was last night, he had the debate against Rick Scott. Not Rick Scott. Charlie Crist, who, also kind of, like
top 10 most lukewarm Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, former Republican governor of Florida. Like it's, not really a bleeding heart liberal. So he's debating DeSantis, and the part that's gone viral is when he asks DeSantis, like he says, like, you've talked a lot about Joe Biden, and I understand why you're confused. You think you're running for a different job, and just tell us now, like, are you if you're elected, would you stay in governor for, be here for the next 4 years? And he just like freezes. Like you can hear the Windows
He made that
95
like that
boot up.
face, the face that you get when you're caught. You know what I mean?
It's like, how did you like? You had nothing to say about that. Like, just lie. Who cares?
You just got the audience going like, huh? Like just gasping and oohing, like
Yeah.
like, oh, you got wrecked by Charlie Crist, really?
And then he like tried to make a comeback. Was like, well, the only tired old donkey that I'm thinking about beating right now is you. And then like that also got countered where he's just like, yeah, like like bullying basically. It's like, at least do it to me and not like the kids that you did on that when he was like yelling at those kids for wearing the masks
Right.
at that conference. So it's like, again, it was like he tried to reverse it, then it just got reversed back to him. But it's just like, can you imagine this guy on a Republican debate stage?
Oh my! I mean, again, it's just like,
And what's up with Florida politicians in general, right? I mean, like Rubio's like the same way, where it's just robotic. Like
Chads. There are no Chads.
I have to stay on script no matter what. Like,
yeah, or just that robotic water drinking he did when he did like the State of the Union response. Yeah, I don't know what it is about Florida Republicans, right? Because they've run this horrifying anti-democratic. I'm not saying in the anti-democratic party way. I mean, like,
yeah,
like they have literally subverted democracy. I mean, like, if any other country did the shit that they did in 2001,
they'd be
we would boots on the ground. CIA murking people, like that would have happened immediately. So I just don't understand. Like, these guys are ruthless and cutthroat. I mentioned too that like DeSantis literally like cut down a measure to like restore voting rights for felons. All that shit. And when it comes down to it, like there's just those pictures of like DeSantis awkwardly standing on stage like he has just worn a suit for the first time. Just Rubio with his weird ill-fitting cowboy boots and his like transparent hairline, or like, I mean, if we want to talk about like DeSantis getting wrecked in a debate, I mean, shit, let's talk about the first time he ran for governor, and like, even though Andrew Gillum lost, let's talk about that, like, what was that, like a hit dog will holler moment that was like that went viral that year?
I don't remember. You'll have to refresh me.
Well, so basically, like, Gillum was for anyone who doesn't remember, Andrew Gillum was a black candidate running against Ron DeSantis in the same race. I think it was what was it? Rick Scott's term had expired, so it was like a fresh race. So Gillum basically had a gotcha like scripted and ready to go, and it was executed pretty much flawlessly. Where he basically exposed like, oh yeah, Ron DeSantis has been caught basically using the N-word gratuitously to describe not just Obama but other black politicians, and you have this moment of DeSantis like stuttering and like trying to like weasel his way out of it, and then Gillum responds with, my grandmother told me a hit dog will holler, and he hollered across this room, which is, I'm sorry, like if you have like those kind of like Southern pithy kind of stuff going on in a political debate, gold star moment,
Yeah.
It's just again, like this guy got his ass handed to him then, and he still found a way to win it, right? Let's even talk about, I mean, just Jeb Bush in general, right? Like, charismaless, poised to be the next like Scion in 2016. Just blown out the water.
Yeah, like it's just in like, and like there's a reason like you still see like the Jeb meme. It's because it was just so like, he was poised to probably win the whole thing, right? And it just was like the most underperforming candidate. No one's attending his town halls. Please clap. Being like literally castrated by Donald Trump on the debate stage. Just nothing.
And I'm just like, I'm imagining how horrifyingly lame that election would be. Between, let's say we did get like the Democratic Party in 2016 playing out exactly the way it did, but Hillary Clinton is running against Jeb Bush. Can you imagine how boring that shit would be?
Yeah, I mean,
Not that
would've been-
election should be fun because like I want to have a laugh, but just like how nothing of substance would ever occur at that point.
Well, and then like, you know, what would be even like what would they really be debating on? Right? Like, so what would be the contrast between them?
I don't know. I mean, you would probably not have Bill Clinton's legacy being brought up. You wouldn't have the Pacific Partnership Plan be a mainstay in the debates. You definitely wouldn't have had.
Well, and they would have both been for it. I mean, Hillary had defected from it, which was like, it's like you fucking, you know, you negotiated the plan, like
right, like literally, like like the discussion on trade and globalism, you know, it would have never come up in that Trump fashion, the way that it did. You definitely wouldn't have had man. I could not imagine the culture war stage that possible future would have been in. Like imagine like the kind of tension that's latent in our moment.
Yeah.
But with like 2016 Obama is still president sensibilities.
Yeah, I mean, it
Like
would be
you
an
could cut the
improvement, but
it well, that's the thing. It's like, would it be an improvement or would it just be like you would have?
I mean, I feel like realistically, I think you're probably just postponing it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is like you would probably have had Charlottesville and January 6th happen on the same day rather than as split events broken up by like a couple years.
Yeah, sure.
Not that my predictions matter and not that like I want to be right about any of this. None of these events should have happened, frankly, but I really don't know like what's really what stands to change from this election. Like I don't want the Republicans to win, of course. Who does?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that like, and like I kind of buy the argument, right? That like, you know, it's like if they win, like, do you then just get like January 6th, but for real? And you know, or they do like the quote unquote legal version of it, and you know, I think that's like the thing that's frustrating, right? And like, and in Michigan too, it's like it's one of those races where it's like, well, we don't have any real impact on like the composition of Congress, right? Because there's no Senate races. The House races, there's a few toss-up districts.
I think the only one that's being watched is like what is it, Slotkin's district?
I don't know why that. So there's 4 being watched. The James district, I have no clue why. It's an open seat, but like it's John James, you know, who ran for Senate twice, and versus I can't remember, Malinka or something on the Democratic side, but he's got like some corruption charges and stuff like that.
Who, James?
No, the other guy.
Oh, Jesus.
I can't remember what his were exactly, but like he's the race is pretty undersupported, and it's like it's probably going to go to James. The Slotkin race is seen as a toss up, but like I haven't seen a ton of strong evidence that it is because the district is a little less gerrymandered than before.
Yeah.
The Kill D district is a little bit more conservative than it was before. So that one's being watched, and then what's the 4th one? The West Coast 3rd district. So that's Hillary Scholten, I think is how you pronounce her name, versus John Gibbs, who kind of came under fire because in college he had written the report about how this country got worse since women got suffrage. So, fun
God,
stuff.
what a stupid thing. What a stupid thing to do.
And then
Oh
like
my
his
God.
campaign is like, well, he was trying to create like thought-provoking conversation. It's like, what kind of thought-provoking conversation is there to be had there? Like,
congratulations, John C. Calhoun is like is following you on fucking Substack now.
yeah,
You did
following on
great.
Parler.
Yep. Oh my God. Even the suburban district stuff is weird. Like the whole thing about the Michigan redistricting stuff, right? Is like I wonder to like what extent reform within the system can happen without like, an active level of citizen participation in the reform efforts, and if not participation, like definitely like oversight, and then like a strong communication of that dissatisfaction. Because like I was definitely one of those good liberals who thought that if you get redistricting on the ballot and get it passed, and it happens, it will be the big fix that will get you, a democratic 100% fucking state delegation. And as it turns out, one, that was never going to be the case. But then two, like I think there's this weird idea, even like among like the reform electorate. That is a weird term for me to use. I will try to clarify that, but like this idea that like you just get the ballot in, and then like it will play itself out, and the fix is in. You don't have to worry about it. But like if you look at the way that a lot of these districts were like redone, it's almost like nonsensical, right? That like,
well, I think I mean I'm not necessarily sure 100% where you're going, but like if you're like referring to like things being maybe a little bit more competitive and whatnot, I think that's what some people expected, and I think that was probably unrealistic. Like there's just more
yeah,
homogenous districts. I mean, whether or not I think the state levels where it's a little bit more of an interesting and open question, and that's not really my forte per se, but it's one of those things where like I kind of wonder if we're going to see, any meaningful changes there too. And I think at the national level, it's like more states have to pursue this route, right? I mean, it's like,
yeah,
it wasn't going to be a cure, but at least makes you feel better about the process. And I think that the problem, though, that we've kind of been running into, it's kind of been the overarching theme of a lot of these episodes, right? Is that, what good is the process if like the outcomes are like garbage, right? Like, like, do I feel good if like, would I feel better about the Trump presidency if he won with the popular vote? No. um what I feel like
yeah,
what I feel like, had like we not gotten January 6th because like, the process let him like sneak into like office on a term, I wouldn't feel good about that either. Like, it's like all these things where it's like I don't know. I mean, I think that's like the weakness of like, liberals in general, right? It's just the trust and process over everything else.
yeah. And I don't know, like the especially the way that like the current Democratic delegation is kind of fucked over with these new districts, right? With like Rashida Tlaib, for example, like mostly being her old district being mostly the city of Detroit, now having to compete with the suburbs. I forget what it was. Like I went to some kind of forum or something like where they talked about the rationale for why they made the new districts the way they were. And basically like I think my angle with it, now that I remember what my angle is, surprise. Adi being disorganized on his own show. Who would have thought? um, is that like all the proposals that ended up being presented to the public were the ones the Republicans designed anyways. The Democrats basically like fumbled the bag on getting any of their proposals through. And you know, how do you get these like weird considerations of like the suburban communities that get counted as part of a district versus the urban ones? And then especially in Detroit's case, you know, with like the unique histories of like redlining, white flight, the randomness of suburbanization and all that shit.
Yeah, and
like,
some of the like, and again, it's sort of like when we simplify the redistricting conversation with like, oh, like look at this district, doesn't it look gerrymandered because it's this weird, bizarre shape? But like the Democrats were trying to push for like stuff that looked a little bit more like that because it would create something that's a little bit more representational as far as like if you had 60% of the vote for Democrats, then like they should win roughly 60% of the races.
Yeah, it's
whereas we don't quite have that.
No. So yeah, I mean, it just I don't know.
I mean, it's certainly better than what we would have had otherwise, but
it's definitely like, well, it's what I wanted, so like I can't exactly complain here. Like it is good that like redistricting is subject to some kind of oversight now, but I think I will never be happy unless I see like perfectly square districts in my lifetime. It's got to be a perfect square, as much as the geographic boundary will allow. You got to fight for whatever you can get in that district, and it's got to respect county lines. Like I think I really love the Iowa congressional maps just out of the blue because they cannot like cross county lines to create a district line. So you have to have the whole county in it. So you have these like very regular. Yeah, it's like you have to basically win the whole county or lose the whole county. You can't just like cut part of it out because it would be disadvantageous to you. Does that actually help with the fairness aspect? I have not done the research, but I don't know.
It's 3-1 split. 3 Republicans to 1 Democrat in Iowa. What was their overall vote percentage? Not really fair. Looking at this, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is that kind of thing, right? Where it's like there's just so much at play with like how do you talk about the lack of fairness in certain elections, right? And it's like I would definitely say that like certain processes, definitely gerrymandering's a big one, but like you got to get into media, you got to get into money in politics, you got to talk civic religion, you definitely got to talk about the limits of electoralism too. It's I don't know. There's no silver bullets with any of this shit.
No, there sadly is not.
So we are how long have let me check when Craig started. 6:22. Okay, so we are kind of at the top of our session. Are you shocked that Shri Tanadar made it back?
This was one of those things I kind of just completely forgot about him, and like even when he announced his candidacy, and I heard he had run unopposed in the primary, it just was in the back of my mind. Maybe it's because it wasn't like a competitive district, so I wasn't thinking about it. But I mean, like it's one of those things where you have to wonder, like, is there, if there's a higher power, is he truly just, or is he truly even in control of things? Like, how does Shri Fanadar of all people get a uncompetitive seat that he's going to like just walk right into?
And oh my god, that initial governor's primary where I think it was Whitmer, Abdul El Sayed, and Sri Tandar, I think were the big three. I don't remember anyone else in the race, if I'm being honest.
If there was, they were like really low tier. Though it was those big three.
Yeah, I think they might have dropped out, or just no one else was in there. Like, if I recall correctly, like Whitmer was the establishment pick. El Sayed is the not the token progressive. Like he was like the.
I was gonna say there's nothing token about progressive.
No, not token. And even then, like he was kind of fighting an uphill battle there, like being like Middle Eastern and like openly like Muslim and stuff, and also having like a big like reform platform, especially on a public health level. Like I like the guy a lot. I don't, but he was met with a lot of hostility. Like I was pretty involved with like Democratic campaigns at the time, and I recall someone saying, I can't name names, but just immediately out of the bat, like a Democrat just saying, sorry, Muslim name, he's not going to win. I'm just like, what the fuck? You guys pride yourself on not being racist and how bad Trump is, and you're just going to say that in your close circles? What the fuck is wrong with you guys?
Yeah, on some level, it's like I kind of understand, like I understand, like from a like quote unquote objective analysis that you might think like, oh yeah, he's got an uphill battle or whatever, but like it was a lot of the stuff was just it felt like he was really heavily dismissed. Like even if you don't think you're gonna win the race, like don't you think it would like there's some value in having this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and that's the funny thing, because then like the real competition was always between Whitmer and El Sayed, but then like Tanadar just comes in out of fucking nowhere as like this kind of like self-financed Trump style candidate. I guess
Trump style would be generous. Like but like in the sense that he was like self-funded, I guess, there's that comparison, but like he flooded the airways with his ads, some of the cringiest campaign ads you might ever find in your life, ads of people mispronouncing his name, and I can't remember all of them, but like I don't want to either.
I don't want to either, but like he basically did the Tom Steyer and Mike Bloomberg pitch that they did for president, basically, where it's just like the guy's it's his own money. He's not taking anyone else's money, so you can trust him.
Actually, what he did was worse than that. He advertised himself as like the true progressive candidate and didn't even really acknowledge so much that he was self-funded.
Well, and that's the thing, is like people were digging up shit on him left and right, and it's like,
oh yeah.
What also shocked me about that campaign too is like how many people in like my own life who like would bill themselves as liberals or progressive, like falling for like his shtick immediately. And the thing about AstroTurf, right, is like it's surprising how many people fall for it. Like it's literally like Democratic Party AstroTurf, and like people either were like misled, fooled, or like dumb enough not to check. And then if you've ever like seen him in public, the guy has no stage presence. I don't get what the fuck is going on.
I know.
And like that's the thing, is like people fall for that line a lot, where it's like, but it's his own money. He's clearly doing something right. And it's like, I don't know what decay, what lack of creativity, what lack of critical insight or ability to dissect something, When did that disappear from like the American political mind? This desperation to find someone you can trust, you know what I mean? That like of all options available, you won't even say, fuck it, I don't like any of them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like and like it reminds me, we had that recent I guess it's not total defection, but departure from the Democratic Party of one Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh fuck! Oh fuck, let's get into that. Yeah.
And like, and it's kind of like the same deal with her, right? Where it was like, I don't think I think she was always even a longer shot than like a Shri Thanadar, right? And I'm looking at the results from that election in that primary. It was 52 Whitmer, 30 Abdul, 17 for Shri. So like he didn't do super well. But like the Tulsi thing, it's like, like, and I'll admit too, like there was a point where I thought that she was, like I didn't necessarily agree with her on everything, but I at least thought that, she was like genuinely this sort of like, kind of like let's sort of dismantle the imperial state a bit, and that like, like any like weird consequences you get, like being, friendlier with someone like, you know, the Syrian dictator, crap, I had his,
Assad.
yeah, Assad, was like it's kind of just acknowledging that, like, yeah, if we're gonna like stop intervention wars, you kind of have to accept that you have to live in a world that has Assad, because you're not gonna kill him. His own people probably aren't gonna kill him, so like you kind of have to accept that, reality. But then like, and there was always the signs that she was like, not totally genuine, right? But and
well,
like
the
that
Hindu
stuff,
nationalism was the biggest
yes.
red flag. Yeah,
But like that's like one of those things where it's like it's buried enough that maybe you wouldn't notice, but like when you do, maybe that should raise a red flag that maybe this isn't the person that I should be supporting.
yeah. I think it's just that thing, right, where it's like someone who's like heterodox in one specific way, if they're able to like weasel their way through it, or if they're able to like hide everything else, right? Because like another thing I was remembering about Tulsi Gabbard was like her very shifty record on like LGBT issues.
Yeah.
Like it took until like 2016, I want to say, for her to basically like admit like, okay, yeah, I was wrong, sorry.
Yeah, I think so. And like I understand some level of like wanting to like sort of forgive people or think that they can evolve, right? Like I the idea of like, true purity tests, like I think, most people, if you really thought about, your past political views, they probably all weren't great, but they
Of
evolved
course,
as you
yeah,
became
yeah.
more informed. But yeah, like that was like the one that she really got like flagged for. And then like, the Hindu nationalism thing, which like again, it just sort of just flies under the domestic radar because, why else, would you, the average American, care about, Hindu nationalists in India? But then like, it's like, well, if you discover this and you're confronted with this information, maybe it's time to evolve your views as well.
Right. I I don't know. I had an item in my fucking outline about like these various grifters, and I think, you know what, maybe we should develop this into a concept for another episode, because I think there is a lot to be talked about with like some of these weird, like, if not like ex-politicians, like journalists who like
Yeah.
take weird right-wing turns, or like
Well,
guys who can become has-beens and then just shift to like weird fringe positions.
and it's like you have like, and some of it's tied to like, like, we can save some of it for the episode, but like one of the things I wanted to like kind of mention on that is that like I feel like people are just like, well, if they're critical of the thing that I'm critical of, they must be on the same side as me. And I think that that's like a really like that particular take divorces yourself from any meaningful nuance. That
Yeah.
like, and like the thing, and I think I sent this to you too, where it was from an academic, but they were like arguing that like Putin was like a credit to like the progressive agenda because he's anti-Western imperialism.
You didn't accidentally get sent like one of those patriotic socialist things, did you? Those MAGA
No.
communist idiots. It's idiocy, and like part of me wonders like, damn, the FBI is really working overtime with some of this stuff. But I
Right? Like, I
digress.
mean, it's not working at all. And but yeah, it's just like, and it's just like some stuff like that where it's like, and again, it's sort of like, I think, uh, for something like in the Putin case, like it's kind of, I think people get really self-absorbed into the American Western lens where they're like, oh, we're like, it's like, no, there's problems in other parts of the world that we aren't necessarily responsible for. There's plenty that we are, but like, it's like we're not like the sole source of evil in this world.
Well, you nailed it, right? You nailed it, which is like everyone feels like you have to have like a particular person you can adopt as your champion. You need to have a particular take that
Yeah.
answers everything. You need to like you have to have a answer and you have to have the answer. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And whether it's the culture war, whether it's this like lionization or demonization of like various like things, like I mean, I'm just gonna say it, like with the Ukraine stuff, right? Like, you're really asking me to pick between Putin and Zelensky? I like neither of these guys. Why do I have to pick? Why do I have to pick a guy to like? Why can't I
Well,
just like say that this is unfortunate? You know what I mean?
well,
Like,
and the thing is too that I think that like gets lost in all this on like the Ukrainian thing specifically is like your choice doesn't really matter.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean, like it's like you have minimum. I mean, like you personally have zero stake, but like you, the listener, as well, probably also has zero stake, unless Joe Biden, you've come to join us. Welcome, Dark Brandon. But outside of that, you don't have any like real stake in this. You can you can find what's happening to be horrible. You can find one of the actors to be in the wrong more than the other. But like these people where it's like, oh look, Ukraine did this thing that I don't think is cool. How can you possibly side with Zelensky? It's like, well, it doesn't really matter.
right. It's more like passive, basically entertainment for like American onlookers.
It's
And that's
about as meaningful as whoever you prefer in Game of Thrones.
yeah, yeah. So I've got like an idea here that might tie a lot of this together, right? Which is like I wonder like to what extent some of this kind of thinking or behavior stems from this like inability to admit powerlessness or a lack of agency within this system, right? You've only got two parties you can pick. If voting is the right thing to do, you got to pick the lesser of two evils. You got to participate, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're trapped within this system. You're confined and circumscribed by its rules. And I feel like that's like that inability to admit that you're in the rump position is like something that's so terrifying to people that they just fail to do it. And I'm kind of wondering, like, even if even if you couldn't enact this hypothetically, I've talked to a friend about this, and like it was just a fun thing to bullshit about. I'm not advocating that like this is what we all do, but let's agitate for it. But conceptually, like, what if you could just have a vote of no confidence on your ballot? What if you go to the polls and there's like a button you can click to basically be like, fuck all these guys? What do you think that would like people would turn out just to say it? If you could trigger something from like a majority of people having no confidence, like I don't know. Like,
I think that's the key thing, right? Is if it's meaningful, because I'm like, can't you just vote third party in that case? Like, isn't that option
or just
already
not show
there?
up? Yeah, like I guess like that's the thing. Is like if there was only a way to like channel
you have to channel that discontent into some line of action, and I think that's been the problem, right? Because even like non-voting, that clearly hasn't like mattered. I mean, the way we run elections, like some a little bit behind the hood, is kind of assuming like you're not going to turn out non-voters. That's why like we have to work on these quote unquote moderate persuadables or swing voters, whatever you want to call them. We care about them, and it leads to issues where it's like, well, like I'm as the Democrat or Republican, I'm entitled to your vote on like that side. I mean, the Republican side, I mean, they're giving them all kinds of red meat, but on the Democratic side, it's like, well, I'm inherently entitled to your vote as someone who's on the political left. So I have it. I don't really care about talking to you anymore. I have your vote. I can move on to the next door, and I'm going to talk to this like old granny who will vote for a Nazi if I don't agree to lower her taxes or whatever.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I don't know, because like in the hypothetical I was talking about with my friend, it was like, what if you could trigger like, and it was pure hypothetical. There's no way to prove
Right.
something this
Yeah, and I
hard.
think that's the
Like,
thing is
I
it's like
couldn't trigger a constitutional convention. I don't know. I don't even know if that's like the fix in that case.
well, and I mean, well, and that's another interesting question too, because I mean, as much as like that's probably necessary, like, couldn't you? Like, isn't that arguably treason? Like, I'm sure the FBI would stomp that out pretty quick.
Right, right. That's why.
Like,
That's why I'm saying this
because
is
you're
a
basically saying
hypothetical.
like we're going to overthrow the government with this government.
That's true. Yeah. So this is a purely hypothetical. Like, history would have had to play out differently to even have something like this. You're right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's two pronged. Like, there has to be like a fundamental change or shock to the system, but also like there has to be some kind of like elevation of social
I don't
conscience.
even know what the shock to the system would be, right? Like,
Yeah, it's almost immune to it.
2016 and 2020 have happened.
Yeah,
Like, what shock to the system are you looking for at this point to like
no, that's fair. That's
change
completely fair.
things? Like, and I think it's one of those things too, where it's like, as much as like it kind of ties to our powerlessness and whatnot, but we look to on the political left, people look to Marx or other theorists and stuff like that as like a remedy. But at the same time, it's like you do have to admit that he, at least as far as like how he thinks that stuff will change, has kind of been proven wrong.
I mean, more than that, because here I am, the Marx defender here, right? It's like you have to have a level of organization. You have to have a level of effort put in to even attempt that kind of change, right?
Sure.
And like this is something that like I've talked about with other people in the left space, right? Which is like there's a net refusal among American quote unquote socialists to admit that like we're in a rump position. We're in a world where the Red Scare happened. We're in a world where the Cold War happened. We're in a world where labor has been basically put into a rump position, and even though like there are new wins in certain arenas, and there is this like push or this new like conception of like what American socialism could be, it's all in the ether still. There is no capacity for organization at this point, and no one seems to want to admit that, right?
Right, and that's like always, and like part of what I'm getting at too is like the defense that we always have for like Marxism when people are like, oh well, like look at Cuba, look at all these other places. Like the defense has been like, well, we've never had like quote unquote true Marxism, right? We've never tried that, and like again, that sort of speaks to the difficulty in actually achieving that, right? And the lack of organization. Because it's like, yeah, the way it's been organized before, we've seen what vanguard socialism has, wrought upon different places. We've seen what, even like more, humanistic approaches, like, the Paris Commune, right? Like we saw how like that kind of, loses to the forces of capital and stuff like that.
Well, right. I mean, this is broadly. I mean, I will defend certain things, but that's the principal disagreement we can always come back to, right? Which is like, one, there is capitalist encirclement more broadly, and Mark Fisher, really touches on that book in his book, Capitalist Realism, where like this is a totalizing system, and it's the system that has won. It's resistant to change, and it's the one we're trapped in currently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think even though like,
and it's more entrenched now than it was then.
Yeah, and that is the bottom line at the end of the day. Is like,
and as timeless as a lot of his like just real quick, like as timeless as a lot of his critiques of capitalism are, it's like he's writing about a very different capitalist structure that I think was infinitely weaker than it is today. Yeah.
And it is the kind of thing where it's like, even if I don't know, I will always defend that history. I think it is something that people in those places should be proud of. I think the world communist, struggle was something positive, even if there were missteps along the way, right? Sure. But you're right. It lost to the forces of capital. It did not win in certain places, and in the places where it still exists, it is under the effect of capitalist encirclement. Mark Fisher's theory of capitalist realism holds true, unfortunately. And the more that people like, I don't like depressing people, you know. I don't like you know, being like the guy who's like, you know, you lost a long time ago. That's not really what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
But you have to admit that like you're not winning here. You know, you haven't won yet. You're not even close to it yet. You are in the system where you are fighting with several, if not both hands behind your back, your legs too.
Yeah.
And the quicker people admit that, you know, the more relief I feel like people would have. Because there's this like, I feel like the malaise is really coming from like this idea of like just one more thing to wait through and it'll all be better soon. And I don't think it's ever worked like that.
No, and I think, you know, on some level, it's sort of a way to sort of like, it's kind of that idea of, you know, not exactly manifest destiny as we like think of it, but it's, you know, this idea of like destiny that like it's just sort of one more thing and then, you know, it'll all change and stuff like that. And it's just it's not how things work, unfortunately.
Yeah. But again, like that's, I don't know, that is like the thing about, I don't know if maturity is the right word for it. I don't know if clarity is the right word for it, but like at a point people have to be able to look at like the current state of things, and I don't think giving in to despair is always the thing to do. I know I'm prone to it. I know I do it a lot.
It's probably never the thing to do.
You're right, and it's also like you can never like take it on yourself as an individual. That like everything that's wrong with the world, you can't take it on yourself as an individual. But you have to, you know, have that measure of like you are existing within a fundamentally fucked up system.
Yeah. And
the more you deny it, the more just like psychic damage you do to yourself. I don't know how else to say it.
I think that's probably the best way to like say it, right? I think that it's, you know, it's not a whole lot. You have to like, you know, sort of concede that, and I'm not saying that like, you know, hope for change is like naive or worthless.
Yeah, not at all. We've never said that, but yeah.
But yeah, it's like, you know, you have to sort of concede that you know, there's things that need to be done that aren't necessarily being addressed, and again, like organizations tied to it. It's not. I think, you know, the accelerationist theory. I think those people are probably wrong.
Yeah,
I don't honestly know.
I agree with you there, because it's just like any answer which is I can just sit on my ass and watch it burn never looked realistic to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have. I mean, again, it's like one of those things where it's like you just like kind of look at like the historical evidence. And it's like, yeah, do you know where like things have been like, and not to, you know, like pull like, you know, the Candace Owens want to do these days, but it's like, yeah, do you know who else rose to power through, you know, things hitting rock bottom? Hitler. Like, it's like, you know, it's like that's not like, you know, our worldview is not necessarily the one that triumphs once rock bottom's hit.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? It's like it's not just that things hit rock bottom and Hitler comes in. It's like there were several missteps and bad moves that the SPD made. You know what I mean? Like yeah. I mean I'll say it. I'm full throated in this. That like I believe in you know, in Marxism. I think that the world struggles for socialism and communism are a net good, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that there were missteps. Like you got to be honest about certain missteps that happened. You got to be honest that like some people really fumbled the bag in certain places. Some people really did lose. Some people like really got betrayed.
Well, and I think that that's an important thing to like emphasize too, because like, you know, I think that there's tend to be like almost like an apologism, right? Where it's like, you know, well, we only, you know, lost because like, you know, the other side cheated or, you know, they were just, you know, too strong or whatever. But like you have to acknowledge that like on some level there is some individual level of, or, you know, even group level of, you know, like on your side that there were missteps that were taken. and you should learn from them. You can't ignore them.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing is like, you know, the question of like what to do about capitalist encirclement. Yeah, it does like seem like a way to let people off the hook, but it's also like it's the same problem that you as a modern day person who might feel like you're picking up the torch, right? You're also affected by it. You have to figure out a way to think around it. You've got to figure out like, you know, how do you prevent yourself from being subject to the same forces? How do you find a way around it? Can you not make the same mistakes, you know? There's nothing wrong in admitting that, like, you know, the past did not go the way we wish it did. That's why like
it's why the present is what it is.
Exactly. Like, there's nothing if you're a materialist.
Yeah, it's like very clearly the past did not necessarily go as planned. Otherwise, we would still be in that world.
Exactly. I don't know. If I can just be like, you know, very honest to the listener here, you know, like I do worry sometimes that like I've hit the bottom of the well of everything I have to say sometimes. And I at some level like I do worry about like, you know, like what is everything I'm saying useful here, or is it at least like entertaining, or you know, does it offer someone some clarity or some insight, right? But I think it's probably the most honest thing I can probably do up front is just be like, look, this is the state we're in. We're all waiting for something here. We're all trying to think of something to do here. And being honest about that is what gets you out of a lot of trouble. It saves you a lot of fucking grief.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's enough self-hagiography. I can only say it's, you know, it's good to be back. If I'm saying the same shit every episode, I'm here to do it. It's greenhouse mindset. We will cultivate it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we've thoroughly, like, you know, we have thoroughly exhausted the outline here. The idea of like talking about some of these grifters. Let's maybe develop that into a future episode.
Sure.
Any other closing thoughts or anything else that we should try to reiterate?
Oz apparently kills puppies.
See, Pennsylvania, it's incumbent on you. Do not let this man in.
I had to bring that. So in my class, like I always like for the joke, like negative campaign ad, my go-to was like my opponent kicks puppies. Then that report came out that he or his lab experimented and killed puppies. I'm like, well, I can't not mention this in class.
You know who else did? Sri Tanadar.
That's true, yeah. I forgot about it. Did you just both sides this issue?
No, I'm saying that, you know, we have to flip this on its scale. You know what? It's us versus the dog kickers.
Yeah, that's true.
In more ways than one. Like I'm kind of joking here, but like I mean, low key, like yeah, like what is my politics here? What have we been saying here other than like, can we just have a world that like doesn't have cruelty as its guiding principle? Maybe that's enough. Who knows?
Yeah. Maybe it's enough.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. Thanks again for tuning in, dear listener. Your feedback and support is always important to us. You can check out our various social media links if you'd like to follow us. across the internet in the description below, or send us an email on episode suggestions, constructive criticism, or if you'd just like to say hi. You can follow Josh on Twitter. I'm going to pull it up this time. I'm going to do it.
At Joshua Cost 17.
Up, you beat me into it. Pro wrestling podcast called MonsterPop. I will post the I'll post the links to their show in the description as well. And until then, take care, dear listeners.